channel. I'm your host, Osa. Before we get started here, please like and comment on the video. Leave a like on the video and comment on the video as well. So, also share. Don't forget to share as well. So this helps out with the algorithm, and it has more people get to see the video, helps this channel out, helps us get out more content, all right? Also, we're almost up to 100 subscribers. We need one more subscriber to make it 100 subscribers, and then I got something special for you guys that I got once we hit 100 subscribers. I'll give you a little hint in this video, right? What you're gonna do, you wanna follow us on Instagram, all right? So I'll leave the Instagram tag, should be on the screen right there. So what you wanna do is follow us on Instagram. That's definitely one of the first things you're gonna have to do in order to be prepared for what I have in store for you guys over at the 100 subscriber mark, all right? So here, this video got another Thomas Sowell video. This time is going to be, looks like maybe a series of videos with Thomas Sowell talking to people from the women's rights.
Most of the foolish things that are said on these programs were said 20 and 30 and 40 years ago and refuted 20 and 30 and 40 years ago.
By you, quite often.
Here in the UK, for example, let's take that as an example. The gender pay gap stands at just over 9%. You've got women at the BBC recently saying that the broadcaster is illegally paying them less than men to do the same job. You've got only 7 women running the top FTSE 100 companies.
Yeah.
So it seems to a lot of women that they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
Well, as I look at numbers from various places around the world, I don't find anything faintly resembling an even representation of people in any institution anywhere in the world, broken down by any way. What's amazing to me is that this notion that people would be evenly represented except for these institutional policies, that notion has had such momentum behind it without a speck of evidence being asked or presented.
That 9% pay gap, that's a gap between median hourly earnings between men and women.
But
that
multiple.
exists.
If you're talking about women with the same number of years of experience, with the same continuous service, et cetera, then when I look at that, I don't find that disparity. I find, for example, in many cases, the women are making more, depending on how you break the data down.
When I was studying that some years ago, for example, I found out that young female doctors made much less money than young male doctors. And that seemed like very odd. And so, but when you look into it, you discover that young male doctors work an average of 500 hours a year more than young female doctors, and they get paid for the 500 hours.
And there's also been to add on to that, there's also been a study where they showed jobs that men would usually choose between jobs that women would usually choose. Most men would choose a lot more higher risk jobs, or jobs that threaten their lives, literally threaten their lives, that they could die on the job. There was a very high chance they could, but because that was a very high risk job, they got paid way more than the women who didn't necessarily choose those type of jobs. We had chose more safer jobs, more low risk, more not necessarily hands-on, but you get the idea of it. But those jobs women would choose more often, like teachers, for example, right? Or that are not necessarily valued, as such. It's not necessarily making so much money though. They wish they should, but that's neither here nor there. It's a different conversation. But those type of jobs one would choose more of than the more high risk, high reward, high paying jobs that most men usually take. So that intel, if you add up all the types of jobs that men usually go for, when we used to go for, yes, you will see a gap there. But the gap is there. It's not because it was initially thought of as, oh, there should be a gap. No, the gap is there because of choices that people were making and had the right to make, and then thus we have a quote unquote wage gap, but really we don't. But that's neither here or there.
Correct for all the various factors, such as the number of hours worked, the continuous employment versus taking a few years out to have children and so on. You take all that into account, the differences between men and women become quite trivial. If you look at the academic world, or as far back as 1969, women who were never married and who had earned higher incomes than men who had never married. They became tenured professor at a higher rate than men who had never married. And then later on, if you look at the general population, if you take the women who are past the childbearing years and who work continuously, their incomes were higher than men who would work continuously, and so on. So the difference is that not that the employer is paying them differently, but that they have different characteristics.
But do you
That's interesting. That's interesting too, that those studies actually show that women who, and it kind of makes sense too, because women usually, you know, who don't necessarily have kids at certain ages, you know, they usually are pursuing education, pursuing careers, and thus that time they tend to build up over and over. There's no shortage of or little time, like gaps of time off where they have to take care of kids or they're having a baby or they have to take time off. No, they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then they work through the ranks, and as they work through the ranks, they get more money and stuff like that. So, and now, even today, more and more people are deciding not to get married or whatnot, and then thus the amount of newborns being born not necessarily being there. So that the whole entire wage gap theory of like women still being paid less than men is starting to even look less and less of a true statement now, because there's more women in the workforce now. There's more women who are more career oriented now than ever before, and they're really going after it. So that I don't know how long that theory is still going to stand as we keep going forward into the future or whatnot, but.
Do you agree that it's unfair? If you're a woman...
Not necessarily.
And on average, you're getting paid 9% less than a man. That's not fair, is it? Do you agree that you would be happy if that pay gap was eliminated completely? Because that's all the radical feminists are saying.
What I call cosmic justice has been called by some people social justice. But I think they're unduly modest, because they're trying to correct not only the inequities that they see in society, they're trying to correct the oversights of God or the defects of the cosmos. The argument here is not against real justice or real equality. Both of these things are desirable in themselves. The only argument is that some versions of these things are simply impossible.
Is gender equality desirable?
If you mean by equality of opportunity, yes. If you mean any belief that you're going to get the same end results, the answer is no. What those kinds of goals do is simply tear a society apart, often making all the groups in it worse off than they would have been otherwise.
People are treated pretty fairly in Western culture already, but we can.
But they're really not, though, are they? I mean, otherwise, why would there only be 7 women running FTSE 100 companies in the UK? Why would there still be a pay gap?
The central variable in explaining economic differences between men and women is not employer discrimination. It's that women, it's child rearing, marriage and child rearing. That's the variable. As that varies, a women's arrival or participation rate in high-level occupations varies with that. That's
Absolutely.
the okay.
Not all domestic responsibilities can be shared equally, such as having babies, which is not an inconsequential thing since the existence of the human race depends on it. But what it means is that women make choices that make a lot of sense for them.
So you're saying women are just more sensible. They don't want that because it's not a nice life.
I'm saying that's part of it, definitely.
You don't think there are barriers in their way that prevent them getting to the top of those
there are some
companies?
barriers.
I wouldn't dismiss it. I would simply say, if there is evidence that you have, let us see that evidence. What I think is really tragic is that assertions have been made not only without evidence being offered, but without anyone even asking for evidence. It's as if these are self-evident truths that have been brought down from the mountainside.
So the barriers, I think there's barriers, yeah. I think there's barriers not necessarily from, well, there probably is barriers from companies that are stopping them or whatnot. But I think that goes back to the whole being agreeable and not agreeable thing, theory. Whereas if the less agreeable you are, the more not flamboyant, but more of like a wrecking ball, so to speak, right? The more you rise up in rankings of a job-like atmosphere. So that barrier is existing because most women are not necessarily how do I put this? Most women are not necessarily equipped to be so non-agreeable, right? As surprising as that sounds, right? But I know most people would be like, oh, no, that's not true. You know, all women are. But deep down, most in the core, most women are not like that. So that is a barrier that most women have to break, and sometimes that barrier is what they identify with. So that is a big barrier that they have to break, and once they break that barrier, then they're going up on the ranks and moving up the corporate ladder to get to the top. They're doing it. They're really doing it. I don't know how many since Fortune 500 CEOs keep being mentioned here. I don't know how many are up there right now, though. I might do a little research and put it up, but it's probably way more than 7 now. I'll be surprised if it's less.
You're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen. Because a lot of people listening to you will just say, I mean, are we going back to the dark ages?
That's because they're actually not listening.
I'm listening very carefully, and I'm hearing you basically saying women need to just accept they're never going to make it on equal terms. Equal outcomes is how you defined it. But you're going to put all those hurdles in their way, as has been in their way for centuries, and that's fine. You're saying that's fine.
I'm quoting you to yourself, Tom. Quote, "It is widely believed that the rise of American women in high-level occupations since the 1960s has been due to anti-discrimination laws, and that these, in turn, have been due to the feminist movement. In reality, the proportion of women in high-level occupations was greater during the first decades of the 20th century than in the middle of the 20th century, and all of this was before the feminist movement." Explain.
Yes, in the first half of the 20th century, for example, in 1908, the percentage of women in who's who in America was twice what it was in 1950. And various fields, if you look at the women who got PhDs in economics, chemistry, who got law degrees, other postgraduate degrees, those were all higher in the 20s and 30s than they were in the 50s. Now, the people on the other side say the opposite by the simple expedient of looking as if the world began in 1960. They ignore all the rest of that, and they say it's all due to the feminist movement, to anti-discrimination laws, and so forth.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that female traits don't predict success. You're just saying these things, though, to provoke, aren't you? I mean, you are a provocateur.
I never said
You're like
anything.
the alt-right that you hate to be compared to. Aren't you just whipping people up into a state of anger? And
Not at all.
Those people who disagree with those with a vision of cosmic justice must be stopped, in their view, by all means necessary. And that, of course, includes character assassination.
What they believe seems so obviously true that if you're standing in the way of it, either you must be incredibly stupid, utterly uninformed, or simply dishonest. People like that find it very hard to believe that someone else could honestly, sincerely, and intelligently reach a different conclusion. They talk about how complex the world is, but it never seems to be complex enough that other people could have read the same evidence they looked at and come up with a different conclusion.
So that's the end of the video. There you have it, right? So, like I said before, there's been multiple research, statistics, data that's been proven otherwise about the whole wage gap thing. In terms of other barriers, there are barriers, of course, but that's more so of a personal barrier than work-related barriers, of course. And in terms of even Thomas pointed out, back in the early 20th century, more women were going after higher level degrees like chemistry and engineering and things of that nature, and they were getting paid just as much as their male counterparts. So, and that also proves to the point where I mentioned where more women were choosing a lot less, less stress, a lot more safer jobs than men were choosing more higher risk, a lot more stressful jobs, and thus because of that they're getting paid a lot more than women are, right? I'll give an example real quick before we wrap it up. I went to college for my first 4 years for biology, right? And biology, normally if you're doing biology, normally that's more so a medical field. You want to use that as a springboard to get into medical school, regardless if it's nursing or a PA, physician assistant, or an actual physician/doctor, right? So regardless of whatever position you are in, you know, usually you would take biology or human biology as a springboard to go to the next, to go into medical school or whatnot. So, you know, as I was there in college for my first 4 years, it was dominated by women, right? So most of the women usually are there, and most of the women wanted to either, you know, some wanted to be doctors, some wanted to be physician assistants, PAs. Others wanted to be nurses. You know, it was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag for a lot of things, but the majority was dominated by women. So, you know, most of my classes, it was mostly women in those classes, and that's a high level field. Like, women usually dominate the medical field. Matter of fact, I think it's almost 50, almost close to 60-40 women dominating the medical field, which is a high level job, basically, right? It's a high stress, high reward job. You know, people's lives are in your hands, basically, and that's a high level job. So they get paid accordingly with that. So, and in comparison to that, I went back to school, I think 3 years ago or so, and I took for computer science. Computer science is more of a coding thing, right? So more programming, so we were using computers a lot more, do a whole bunch of development stuff, engineering stuff and whatnot, and that was dominated by men. So men were mostly the ones going into these coding fields, and you see a lot of guys in it, you know, a handful of girls here and there. Matter of fact, I think the school that I went to was even trying to encourage women to get into computer science by having these certain programs that they have, you know, women code, you know, clubs, you know, trying to encourage women to get into coding, you know, but, you know, sometimes the interest is just not there because, you know, it is stressful, yes it is, it's a stressful thing to do, especially, you know, creating something out of scratch most of the time. That's what you're mostly doing. And trying to have, you know, make stuff, build stuff and make stuff just basically come together. Basically, like, you're basically an artist. If we want to, you know, simplify things a little bit, you're basically an artist, and your computer is your canvas, and you have to, you know, whatever you're using, whatever IDE you're using, you know, you're building stuff up. So, and then making sure it's functionally working the way that people can understand, and people have no problems with it. So, you know, there's a lot of things that goes on with the whole coding thing. It's a stressful thing, it is. And I can understand why there's not a lot of women in that field, you know. And trust me, there's been great pushes where people are trying to, you know, have women get into code. And I know a lot of Instagram women who are in code, you know, they're always pushing this drive, hey, let's get women more in, which is totally fine, you know. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to point out here is that there's choice. And choice to do what you want to do, if given that leeway to choose whatever you want to choose, majority of the time we would choose something less stressful, something that's safe, something that's, you know, they're not necessarily putting their livelihood on the line per se, while guys are usually more stressed out and putting their lives on the line in one way, shape, or form, or having to sacrifice something along the way, right? So that's just kind of the dichotomy in there in terms of just the wage gap, and, you know, just in terms of like the two different scenarios I even pointed out to kind of show you what's been going on here, right? So it's not necessarily, you know, people are keeping women down. It's just you have a choice. Do you want to choose something more stressful? You want to, you know, put your mind into that. You want to try to see if you can conquer something like that, or you want something that's not less. That's, you know, it's still challenging, but not as stressful. Much more safer. You get, you know, okay money, but you be all right, you know, until, you know, certain stuff happens in your life. You decide to do anything like marriage or whatever, right? So it's definitely, if you give certain people the choice, you know, obviously one group would choose one group would choose the other. You know, it's just what it is at the end of the day. All right. So that is the video. Thank you guys so much for subscribing up, getting us closer to 100 subscribers. Like I said before, earlier in the video, in order to give you a little hint, subscribe to the Instagram account. I'll leave it here. Call it a Spade. All right, so I'll leave it down here somewhere, so it'll pop up. And yeah, again, once again, thank you. Please don't forget to like, comment, share the video. Also subscribe if you have not subscribed already. Hit the bell next to the subscribe button so that you get notified whenever I drop something. And tell them in the comments, is there still such thing as a wage gap between men and women? And also, what are other differences that men and women do face that women feel that they're being somewhat discriminated against, right? Please leave a comment down below. And thank you, once again, thank you for watching the video. I'll catch you guys in the next one, alright? Peace. Let me start with congratulations, sooner or later appreciation for all the work you've put in. Damn, you came farther than the depths of the ocean water. Still undiscovered, I know Jones will be prouder. Still chasing things out loud, scope change. For better or worse, I still left unhinged.